got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cryptid Podcast. I'm your host Dano. You guys, I got a great show tonight. Before I give you any little iggies on the show, I just want to say thank you for all you guys' support. It is truly appreciated. Let you guys know that getting close to that goal that I set for myself, and again, if I hit it, I hit it. If I don't, I don't. Not going to be upset about it. But again, if you guys like to check out the episodes, I'm coming up very close to 100 episodes, you guys. Check out what I've already got posted up there. If you guys like what you see in here, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to hit those notifications so you know when I go live and drop new content. Also, I do have a membership, $2.99. And what that'll do is it'll get you a members only episode, early access to a Saturday release episode, and your name in for a drawing. And I am going to be doing a drawing. I think I might start it in October. And what will be given away with going to think of a couple other things, but this is one thing that will be given away. It's a new patch that I have made for the, I don't know if that's good, that I have for the show. Again, you'll get one of these patches. Again, that membership is only $2.99. Greatly appreciate it. So, you guys, tonight I'm going to bring Christian on in a second. And Christian is in North Carolina. And back in the early 2000s, he had a Bigfoot encounter. And this encounter took place pretty close to the Virginia-North Carolina line. But he also had another encounter later on. And he's not really quite sure what he saw or what he can consider this sighting to be, but he said it was a flying thing. I'll let him get into details. He did say it is not a UFO, so he will get into more detail with that. But before I do, if you guys have had an encounter you'd like to come on the show, hit me up at the Cryptid Podcast 72 gmail.com. Again, that's the Cryptid Podcast 72 at gmail.com. Without further ado, let's bring our guest on, Christian. Christian, buddy, what's going on?
Not too much. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. Now we've been chatting back and forth for what, a couple weeks now, trying to
Something like that.
square down, get a date nailed down. We've had a couple, and a reschedule here and a reschedule there, but hey, here we are.
Here we are.
All right, man. So hey, I'm just gonna go ahead and let you get right on into your encounters.
Okay. All right. These encounters, they would have been, like I said, about 20 years ago or so. And there's a connecting road, like Dan said, that it's, kind of the line, the line for Virginia and North Carolina is on this road. It's a river, actually. Now, there's a long road that goes, it kind of weaves its way back and forth into Virginia and North Carolina. You go down that road, and then there's a connecting road. Now, we were turning off of this long road from the Virginia side. We had crossed over into Virginia, and we were turning onto this connecting road. And I had a couple of people with me, but the guy beside of me, we saw the same thing. But first we just thought it was a deer. It would have been over on the left side of the road. And my first thought was it was either a white-tailed deer or a mule deer. And I know some people say we don't have mule deer here, but it kind of reminded me of that because it had this kind of like tawny brownish sort of gray fur, like it sort of faded, from one color into the other. And it was on all fours. It was there's brush that was probably at least waist height, if not a little bit higher, but you could see the top and the back end of the animal. And when my lights hit it, and we're turning down this road, we're going fairly slow, but we're starting to speed up, but we're trying to slow down too because we think there's this deer on the side of the road. And by the time my lights hit it, it just raises up on two legs and it raises up on two legs, and it sort of, like a man after a hard day's work, it sort of stood up and flexed its shoulders backwards, sort of like that, and it started to turn and look at us. But for some reason, and I never could figure out if it just thought better of the situation, or if it's where its neck was so thick, maybe it couldn't turn further. But it didn't turn at the waist. It just sort of like casually turned at the neck and the head and sort of looked over its shoulder at us. And at that point, it was very clear that we weren't looking at the deer. I've seen deer raise up on two legs and, go after apples in the trees and, weird things like that. But this is not what this thing was. It wasn't a man. It was, I'd say, about 7.5 feet tall, roughly. Um, it was covered in this tawny, grayish brown fur, and it was not super long, but it was shaggy to an extent. But you could see, like, when it flexed its shoulders and when it moved its arms, you could see the muscles ripple. I remember that very distinctly. You could see the muscles ripple in the arms, and when it turned its head, it was kind of obvious to me. Sort of like an ape. How an ape has like a thicker neck, and it kind of prevents them from turning all the way. That's kind of the thought I had, because this thing was built really, really solid. And like I said, it was just, it was covered in fur. It started turning and look at us, but it never turned and looked at us full on in the face. So I couldn't say 100% what it was. What I do know, I couldn't, of course, you can't be 100% on anything, but I'm pretty sure, pretty confident that it wasn't a man. This is the type of place where you wouldn't play that kind of game, and there would have been no point back then. But like I said, it stood up and flexed its shoulders, and it started to turn and look at us, and then it stopped, and it just turned its head back straight, like in the direction it was looking, and it just took maybe 2 or 3 strides, and it was into the pines right there, and right all through that area, it's swampy, and there's lots of pines and that sort of thing. And it walked straight into the pine trees, and I don't know if it went behind a pine tree or what it did, but as soon as it got into that blackness beyond where my lights could see, it was just like nothing. And at that point, we had come to a full stop in the road, and it was kind of odd, because we didn't, a lot of people say you smell things, you smell like a bad odor or different things with like a Bigfoot sighting. We didn't smell anything. We didn't hear anything. We didn't hear I don't even recall hearing the weeds crunch, and I'm sure they did, but I don't recall hearing the weeds crunch. Um, and when it was into the pines, it was just like it never existed. If it was there, it was either behind a tree or so deep in that we couldn't see at that point. Um, and that was the last we saw of it. It was pretty short and sweet. I got the impression that it was maybe eating an animal, or maybe it was eating blackberries or something on the side of the road, and I think we disturbed it by the way it acted. Um, that was pretty much the first encounter. Not a lot to it, not a whole lot to the second one, really. It's a pretty concise story. There's a lot of weird things that happen out there. But let's see, this would have been probably a year or two later. We're turning on the same road, and this time, strangely enough, I've got the same guy with me in the front. The other people weren't with me this time, but it was just me and this other guy, and we turned on this road. And this would have been, let's see, if the first sighting, it was probably within the first 16th of a mile of the road. And I would say the second sighting was in an eighth, maybe a quarter of a mile at the most from the first sighting. And we see what we think is a bird at first. Like, we got some pretty big buzzards and stuff here, but we don't have like condors. Every once in a while you see an eagle or a falcon or something. It's pretty good size, but not this sort of size. So we were kind of paying attention to it. It was dark outside. Um, but we see this thing, like, it sort of, there's trees at this point. There's trees that kind of like go over the road, sort of like this, but there's a break in the middle of the trees, and that kind of spanned uh, both lanes of the road. And I can't remember. I used to work on the roads. If I'm not mistaken, the lanes are 13 feet wide, I believe they are. Um, anyway, it doesn't matter. But my point is that kind of gives you an estimation, sort of, of what we were seeing. Um, but we see what we think is a bird, and it didn't look like it came from the trees. It looked like it came from over the trees, and it came down, And I'm driving, and I'm starting to, at this point, not quite slowing down, but I'm starting to slow down. And we see this thing, and we're kind of paying attention to it just because it's so large, and it comes down, and like say this is the bumper to our car. This thing, that it goes so low for just a fraction of a second that we lose sight of it altogether. And I was just, whatever it was, I was sure it was going to hit the car. Whatever it was, I was 100% positive it was going to hit the car. But as soon as it went below the car, it just came up. It came over the hood, and if this camera was our face, it pretty much, it went straight up over the roof, over the windshield. It didn't hit the car, didn't hit the windshield. I don't recall it making any sound. We usually kept the windows down, like in the summertime, the springtime. Um, and like I said, I didn't particularly like telling this story because of how it sounds, and but if and we were talking a little bit earlier, and I know Jeepers Creepers is a movie, but this thing was the closest thing to like a flying demon that I could. I don't know exactly what it was. It looked to be like a man, but if it was a man, it would have been a dead man because the skin had this like grayish pallor to it. Um, and it came down, and it had these wings that came off the side of it, and the wings resembled bat wings, but if you like scaled the size up to about the size of a man. um and something else that I failed to mention is this. What appeared to be an animal was partially clothed, and that's another thing that I have never figured out, because there would have been no way to fake this that I'm aware of, and I just don't know. I just don't know what we were seeing. It was like a man, kind of like a man. I mean, it looked like a man. It had two arms and two legs, and it had a torso and a neck and a head, but it had these giant wings coming off the back. And we never saw it flap its wings. Its wings just sort of stayed static, or the best I remember, the wings stayed static. But it had to have some form of lift, so maybe we just missed it in the dark. I don't know. But like I said, it flew up and it flew over the car, and my friend, he's terrified. He's a right big guy, and he's trying to climb out the passenger window, and I don't know where he thought he was going to go, but he's screaming and trying to climb out the passenger window, trying to get me to stop the car, and I don't know where he thought he was going to run to or whatever. But so at this point, I'm kind of like slowed down. Um, but we very quickly sped up again, because when he realized I wasn't going to stop the car, then we reached the decision to just go. And that was pretty much the second experience. I don't have a whole lot to. I mean, I could get into some more detail about it, but I, that was pretty much the experiences. They were pretty brief, but I'm not really sure. The first one, like I said, I would relate to being a Bigfoot as best as I could tell you with the knowledge that I have. The second thing that I saw, I have no reference for, on this earthly plane. Like, we saw it, and I know that it must exist, but I just don't have a clue how to tell you what it was. Truly.
Can
Um,
you get into the encounter? You said a lady in the area has also seen this creature.
yeah,
Can you can
yeah,
you can you kind of get into some of her encounter, or what you know of it?
yeah. Yeah, I talked to this guy. I believe it was on YouTube, and it was from this channel, Spooky Appalachia, and I've been looking for answers, and he kind of gave me. He keeps sort of case files when people contact him, and he said that this was one of the encounters that reminded him of my encounter. Was this girl and her brother? I don't remember her name right offhand. It doesn't matter. But they lived at the time on a road that's, say, maybe 3 to 5 miles from the connecting road that we were on. And apparently, her and her brother both have had multiple sightings of a creature that sounds very, very similar to what I saw, as far as the flying humanoid thing. Um, and apparently, she was the first one to see it. And the first time, it basically did the same thing. I don't remember if it approached her from the front or the back. I can't remember exactly what they said, but that she was driving some sort of truck or SUV, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and whatever this thing was, when it went over her car, it must, I don't know if it grabbed a hold of it or if it just knocked into the car or what, but supposedly her car had scratches on the hood and the roof of the car, the roof and the trunk, like down to the metal, like that went through the paint. And then it was, I believe they said it was a year or two later, and her brother had a similar sighting on the same road of seeing the same flying thing. And they both described it pretty much like I just what I described to you. Um, and from what I understand, I don't know if she's seen it once or twice, and I believe the brother has seen it twice out on this road. And strangely enough, I forgot to mention it to you, like we were having a little chat earlier. But I have there's another friend of mine, and I was trying to tell him this story one day, and he stops me in the middle of the story, and he describes this thing to me before I describe it to him. And he tells me this story about being on the bridge, which is right at the border, which would have been maybe a mile from where I saw it. And about 20 years prior to me seeing it, he was out on the bridge with a couple friends, and he sees this very same animal, creature, whatever it was. He saw this exact same thing, but it was on the bridge over the river. And he described verbatim what I just described to you without me mentioning it to him, without me telling him anything about it. He described it right down to every little fine detail. So I have no doubt that he saw it. But this would have been about 20 years prior to the time that I saw it. And I don't know how that falls into the timeline with the girl and her brother exactly. But I had forgot to tell you that. But apparently, there's something out there that people are seeing that is equated with what we saw. I don't know how to tell you what it is, but there's something out there.
All right. Oh, got me writing questions here. Holy smokes. Holy smokes. Let me just finish my last one here. Okay, let's go here. All right, so we're gonna go back to your Bigfoot encounter,
Mhm.
and my headphones, I accidentally pulled the cord out, so I couldn't hear. So, um, about what time of day did that encounter happen?
Um, this would have been probably about 11:30 or so at night.
Okay, all right. And what drew your attention to this creature, um, Bigfoot? Do you believe you saw? What drew your attention to look at that? You know, whatever side of the road it was on.
It was on the left side. Um, it was like I said, it was crouched in the weeds, and at first we were just turned onto the road, so we had already slowed down a little bit. And actually, my buddy, he was the one that was like, man, you need to slow down. There's a deer over there, kind of pointing to that direction. And so we thought it was a deer, and this was my first car that I had, and so I was very protective of it, So I didn't want to crash it, obviously, and I didn't want a deer to run into it, and I didn't want to run into any deer. And so I started to slow down, but when my headlights, I had my bright lights on, and like I said, when my lights hit it, it just immediately stood up on two legs like a man, you know, and flexed its shoulders backwards, and it just immediately. I was already paying attention to it, but at that point, it goes from being a deer to being, I guess, a Bigfoot. I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure because it never looked at me in the face, but um, that's what I would think that it was. The best I could tell you from what I know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like you and your friend are kinda like how I am. I notice things on the side of the road
Mhm.
that should not be there.
Yeah.
Like, I'll whenever we drive, like, if we drive down to Tennessee or we drive over to Michigan, my wife and I point stuff out all the time. She's like, "You're not even paying attention to the road." "Oh, no, I'm paying attention to the road because I'm pointing things out that normally are not supposed to be there on the side." So even if I see roadkill,
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh, there's a deer, there's a deer. Oh, there's a
Yeah.
raccoon," it something just sticks out. So, yeah, it's kind of cool. That's how he saw it and let you know about it. About how far away was it before it turned and then walked off into the woods? How close to you were you?
Um, I would say initially it was maybe 4 or 5 car lengths away, and as we sort of pulled up to it, um, I didn't quite get right up beside of it, but before it got into the woods, but I got almost right up to its backside as we were pulling up. So it was kind of at this point it would have been standing static as we were pulling up,
Hmm.
and we got up pretty close to it, like close enough to where I could see the definition in its arms and its
Yeah.
neck and its back as it flexed a little bit. It was dark outside, but like I said, in the headlights, you could just I don't know, you could see it. I don't know how to describe it to you, but it was very muscular, whatever it was. It wasn't a man in a suit. I guarantee you that.
About how long was the encounter?
Um, Not long. I would say maybe 10 seconds, maybe as much as 15, but I wouldn't think it would have been any longer than that.
Okay. And if you can recall, what did its movement look like from the time that it kind of turned to kind of look at you to the time it turned back and then walked off in the woods?
Well, like I said, when it turned its head, I don't know how to show you like with the camera being still, but like when it turned its head, it started to turn to look over its shoulder. But as it got to about, I would say like this point, when it got to be roughly to almost being like where its eyes would be, sort of
Mhm.
at the same attitude or the same direction as its shoulder, at that point it stopped, and at that point, or its head stopped, and at that point, I noticed that its neck would have been a lot thicker than what a man's would have been, and that was kind of my immediate thought that it was, how like you said, like the great apes,
Yep.
how they can only turn their head so far, where their neck is so thick. And now, as far as the locomotion of it, when it took off walking, it was it. I'm trying to think how to tell you. It would probably been about a good 12 or 15 feet to the tree from the edge of the road where it was to the tree line, and it made that within 2 to 3 strides. So it had a pretty big stride path, and um, it kind of walked something like a man, but it took a lot longer strides, obviously. But as it was walking those maybe 3 strides, it was swinging its arms by its side, and that's something else. I noticed its arms were longer, not by like not a lot, but its arms were longer than you would usually see a man's arms, in
Mhm.
my opinion. Just not super long, but just longer than they should have been if it was a man in a suit or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Was it a fluid motion?
yeah, it was a very fluid motion. Um, yeah, it wasn't choppy at all. It was pretty fluid motion. Yeah.
Now, when it walked in, did it have a straight axis to the trees, or did it go down an embankment, or did it go up an embankment?
Pretty much pretty much straight access to the trees. It probably would have dipped down a little bit off the shoulder of the road,
Mhm.
and then as you get into the trees, it kind of turns into a swamp there. So
Okay.
I don't know if it actually would have went down some, or it may have very well been the same height. It just depends on the time of year and how much it's flooded, and several different things. So it may have went down very slightly, but as far as its approach from the road to the trees, it had a pretty flat trajectory to traverse.
Okay. Perfect. All right, let's go into the flying thing.
Mhm,
So, you said it was dark outside, and you
mhm.
pretty much stated that, how dark was it? Because you said it came over the trees and then down.
It was dark, but I think the moon was out that night, and I think that's kind of maybe what caught our attention. Because I don't think my lights probably wouldn't have cast into the top of the tree like that. So the only thing I could tell you is it must have been, I don't know, something glinted off of it or what. But the moon, I have seen the moon so bright out there at certain times of the year that you can distinguish the colors. Like you can see
Yep.
the grass, you can see the brown and the green of the trees. You can distinguish every color sometimes when the moon is bright out there.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I can think to tell you is maybe it just glinted off of something, or maybe that's how we caught the sight of it initially.
And so this thing buzzed your car.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because if you listen to the earlier encounters in Point Pleasant, West Virginia about the Mothman, that
Mhm,
also buzzed cars.
mhm,
Now again, your description doesn't match that of the Mothman,
mhm,
but the characteristics of it does.
mhm.
And what I found that what you really caught me off guard with was that you said it looked like it was wearing like it was partly clothed.
Yeah.
So what do
Eh,
you mean that it was partially clothed? Like what
Well,
stuck out to you as maybe clothing?
it had what I can remember distinctly. And I think it may have had a couple other pieces, but I don't want to. I'm not 100% on that, so I don't want to tell you a lot. But what I did notice is that it had what appeared to be like a fox, like a pelt or a fox fur, like draped around its neck. You could actually see the redness, and you could see the white of the tail, like when it got low. Um, like it had like a, I don't know if it was a hide, or if it was it. I mean, I guess it could have been a dead fox for all I know, but it looked to be uh, a fox fur or fox hide draped around its neck. And what I found weird is it seemed to be wearing. Uh, I always said breeches, like, because to me, and whatever it was like torn. It looked kind of like torn cloth, like it was patchy, and but they were torn sort of, right below the knee, like maybe 2 or 3 inches,
Mhm.
and it just always struck me like breeches, and that area does have a history that goes, way back to actually pre-revolution. Now, I'm not saying that it has anything to do with that, but it's just in my mind, and maybe it was pants, maybe it was, maybe it's not at all. Maybe it was some kind of pattern that it was a pretty quick sight, and so
Mhm.
um, but those two things stuck out to me really distinctly, is that reddish orange fur around its neck, and would appear to be some sort of pants on it.
Okay.
Um, I don't know, man. I really don't
Des
know.
describe the arms if you can, because you said you definitely saw arms.
Mm.
What did they look like? Did it have hands or did it have claws? What if you can recall?
It 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 pretty much, it had arms and hands that were roughly the size of a man's, I would say. But the skin was like the skin tone matched the skin tone in the face. It had this grayish pallor. It was muscular, um, and it it's like I said, I couldn't swear to it, but I want to tell you that its fingertips were like either pointed or had like nails or claws or something that were sharper than what you would see on a person.
Mhm.
Uh, that's something I remember kind of distinctly, because it looked kind of like a man, but it didn't at the same time. Um, it had a really wide grin on its face, and the eyes are one other thing that I recall very distinctly. And the guy on the bridge, he said the same thing, that either it had either no eyes, or its eyes were like solid black. And that's one thing I remember very distinctly, is it had these just glistening like black eyes. Like you know how sometimes, like, I don't know if you've ever seen a deer up close, but how their pupils almost take up their whole eye, and it
Mhm.
just kind of like they have these black looking eyes sometimes. That's what it reminded me of. Just like black marbles but bigger.
Like obsidian color.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. And you said it's wide mouth. Like,
Mhm.
describe that if you can.
Um, it it appeared almost like it was sneering, because, like I said, it would have came up really close to the front of the windshield. And I don't know how it didn't hit the car, but it had this, like, and maybe it wasn't sneering, maybe it was just the fact that its mouth was that wide. but its mouth was sort of like curled up, and it had really high cheekbones. That's another thing that I remember very distinctly. It had very high cheekbones, and its grin like drew back, like almost like beyond the cheekbones. And I don't know if it actually drew back that far, or if maybe there were creases, or like I said, it was so quick, and it's dark, but it's just certain little things that I remember from it, very distinctly. And that was another thing that I remember, that it had a much wider mouth than a person would have, or it appeared to have a wider mouth anyhow.
Bro, man, you're freaking me out over here, bro. For real, because you're like describing Jeepers Creepers to me, dude. That's what it
Yeah.
sounds like to me. You said it had wings like a bat, but scaled more to a man. So if the wings were completely spread out, if it was to land, could it like wrap its wings around the front of it? Do you think?
I really don't know. I don't think so. They seem to be so wide. I mean, they're not like super wide, but it may have been able to. But to me, if it would have been able to do that, it would have had to have some sort of break in the middle or something, like to maybe to where it could actually like wrap around the
Okay.
body. But if they were just sort of straight like bird wings, if they were built that sort of way, I wouldn't see it happening. But if they had like maybe a hinge point, or like a sort of an elbow, perhaps, of some sort,
Right.
potentially.
About how wide was this wingspan, would you say?
Um, I would say if a lane is 13 feet wide,
Yep.
I would say it was maybe as much as 15 feet. I don't. I'd say between 12 and 15 feet, roughly. I couldn't give you a perfect exact estimation, but I would say somewhere in that area.
Were its arms independent of its wings?
Yes,
Okay.
very much so.
All right, man. Dude, you're describing Jeepers Creepers, man. I'm telling
Yeah.
you. I'm telling
And see,
you.
that's why I don't like telling that story, because it sounds so similar. Somebody's like, "Oh, you've seen the movie, and that's what this is." But this was long before the movies, and well, I think it was anyway. But either way, it was very similar. It wasn't the same, but it was very similar.
Well, you're naming like, well, you didn't name them, but you recounted, what, 4 other people that have
Mm.
seen this creature. So, what was the name of the bridge that it was seen on? Do you recall?
I think the actual name of it is State Line Bridge. Um, but they the most people know it around here as Berry Hill, or the Berry Hill Bridge. That whole area is known as Berry Hill. But I told
Berry,
yes, but
Berry Hill Bridge.
yes. Um, but if you look back into the history of that road, um, there was a revolutionary massacre on the banks of that river. And originally, the name of that whole area was not Berry Hill; it was Bury Hill, and
Bury.
Bury, yeah. And I'm guessing it's probably a lot harder to sell land if all your land is called Bury Hill, would be my guess. So they changed it at some point. But
And what's the name of that river or stream, or
that would be the Dan River, I believe.
the Dan River?
Yes, Dan.
Like my name.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it flows out of Danville, Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's why it's called the Dan. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that would be my guess anyhow.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I when it buzzed your car, did you hear any sound at all?
No,
Nothing.
didn't hear anything. That's the weirdest thing to me, like, because we never, I don't recall seeing it flap, that it moved. I don't recall it seeing its wings. And I've seen birds ride thermals up in the air, and I know how that works. But this thing was like really low to the ground once it came down, and I don't understand how it stayed in the air. And it didn't make a sound. It never touched the car.
It
Um,
didn't flap its wings.
no, not that I recall. They stayed kind of static. and you could see. I couldn't see how the wings were attached by by the way that I saw it, but you could see very distinctly the shoulders and the arms because they were hung like straight down or like in a slightly forward motion, and you could see that the wings were actually behind the arms, like they were. So I'm assuming the wings were connected to the back or the side somehow,
Like
but
the
that you
shoulder
could,
blades.
yeah, maybe the shoulder blades, yeah, or
Okay.
something like that. But you could see that the arms were independent of the wings themselves.
Oh, man. It's not often that I hear an encounter in here where I'm stumped. Like legit, I'm stumped. I have nothing for you, bro.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. I've been going on these podcasts and going on a couple YouTube channels, and I've been looking for somebody else that's seen something similar. Because I'm at a loss, and this is 20 years ago, and it's still so prevalent in my mind. I just want to know what it is. I still go back to that road every once in a while. Matter of fact, I think I got some videos and some pictures of the area. If you want to see what it looks like, I can send you some pictures and some video of that particular area.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I'll email
What
you when we get done.
what was the name of the show host you said that kind of writes down or creates like a case file for his guests? What was the name of that
Well,
show?
it's a YouTube channel called Spooky Appalachia, and I'm not sure if he's based in the Appalachians or what, but apparently he keeps encounters all over North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, the mountains. He keeps all these weird encounters, and he there was another couple encounters that he sent me too of similar people that had fairly similar sightings. I can't recall the details right offhand. I do know one distinctly he was talking about that somebody else had seen a flying humanoid type of thing, and it was somewhere in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe in Tennessee, but I'm pretty sure it was North Carolina somewhere.
Okay.
And he said that those were the two closest things that he could think of. But he was kind of at a loss too. He said he hears stories like this, but and but he was kind of at a loss too. Other than just what people have said about it.
Yeah, I'm
And I,
definitely gonna look up that channel and see if I can reach out to him
yeah,
and kind of talk with him a little bit. So, hey, man, that's all I got for you, brother.
yeah, that's
It
all I
it
got for you.
it was a pleasure talking to you, man. Really.
Yeah,
I'm glad we were able to connect, and yeah, I mean
yeah,
dude, I'm stumped, like for real.
yeah. If anybody has seen anything, feel free to go to my YouTube channel.
Go ahead, plug that YouTube channel.
It's called the Midnight Shadow Line. Um, and I've tinkered on starting a podcast myself, and we did do one episode. I think I'm actually going to revisit. But that's to tell you the truth, I never intended to do anything with that YouTube channel. It was originally my name. But I really, if anybody has any answers, or if anybody has seen anything similar, no matter what it sounds like, let me know about it if you could, or if you have any ideas, anything, just let me know because I've always wanted to see it again, just so I could,
Yep.
just for my own benefit, But I know pretty well that I probably never see it again. But I just
You
want
sh-
to know what it was.
you should get a dash cam, one that faced forward and one that also faced backwards.
Yeah, yeah.
Cause
I think I'm gonna get
yeah,
one of them.
I would, man. Because if you drive up and down that road and you see this thing again, who's to say it's not gonna come up from behind you?
Yeah.
Just imagine if it does, and then you look at that footage, like you
Mm-hmm.
don't even know it's there. Like you're just
Mm-hmm.
driving and you start
Yeah.
looking at
No
your
sound.
footage and you see that thing come flying up behind you and it just goes up like that. Man, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it kind of gives me chills thinking about it, man. It really does. It was disturbing. It really was. When I tell you the guy was climbing out of the car, he was climbing out of that. He was climbing out of the car. He wanted out. I
Yeah.
don't know where he thought he was going to run to, but he was terrified. And I talked to him
Wow.
about it recently, and he said it was so scary that he had basically blocked all of this out. Not blocked it out completely, but he had almost forgotten about it. And he said that when now that he thinks about it, he remembers it all. But he said it was just so traumatizing that it's
Yeah.
almost like his mind put a block around it, like he just don't want to
Yep.
hear about it, don't want to know about it.
And what did you have to do? You had to come in and bring it right to the forefront of his mind. So now he's probably hiding in a closet, covered up with blankets because he's scared to go outside of his house.
He might well be.
He's all up
Not-
underneath his bed.
Yeah,
So
not the bravest guy. He might very well be.
yeah,
But I don't know. But I wouldn't blame him in this particular case. I really wouldn't blame him.
yeah. Either would I, man. That's terrifying, man. Really.
Yeah.
Hey, so let me ask you just one real quick question, man,
Okay.
pertaining to Bigfoot. What do you think they are?
You know, to me, man, it seems so much like an animal, but the fact that I didn't hear anything, I didn't smell anything, and like when I tell you, when they hit those trees, now those trees, it gets black in that forest real quick. You
Mhm.
lose light really, especially at nighttime. But when I tell you it stepped into that black and it was just like gone, it stepped into that black and it was gone.
Yeah.
So now, if it's, me and Tony talked about the idea, and I think that sometimes I wonder if there isn't like some sort of alternate or parallel world or dimension, and maybe somehow these things can step through. But
Yeah.
I think they're actually animals, but I'm not sure that they're here all the time, because if they were, you would think people would be finding them all the time, or at least seeing them occasionally, more than what they do.
Yeah.
But like I said, maybe it just blended in. Maybe it was just really good at blending in. Animals are good at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like I
Absolutely.
said, yeah. But when it made it to the trees, man, it was just like, and we stopped. I came to a complete stop in the road. And because I figured we would hear trees snapping or hear, thuds or something, and we just didn't hear anything. We couldn't see anything, and I didn't have any flashlights or anything in the car. This was back. I think we had flip phones back then, so if it had a light at all, it was, dim, not worthless, pretty worthless. And we just couldn't see anything.
Yeah. Well, man, I just want to say thanks for coming on, brother.
No problem, man.
I appreciate it. And you know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll send you pictures and some video here when we get done.
Yeah, cool.
All
All right,
right,
just
man.
hang out for a second. I'm gonna go ahead and close out. All right.
All right.
You guys, what do you think? What do you think? Bigfoot, obvious. I mean, it's checking all the boxes. What do you do with the second encounter? I mean, it's screaming Jeepers Creepers to me, man. Like legit, that's what it's doing. But again, is that a real thing? Is it a monster, movie monster? Is that movie monster coming to life? Is it a creature that the movie's based off of? I don't know. The way he described it, I'm gonna lost. I can't. I'm gonna have to do some digging for it. But you guys, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to come on the show, there's my email. Hit me up at the cryptidpodcast72@gmail.com. The cryptidpodcast72@gmail.com. Remember, I got a membership $2.99, gets you members only episode every month, as well as early access to a Saturday release show every month, and your name in for a drawing. One of the items that'll be in the giveaway again will be my new patch. I'm probably gonna have another one other than this one. Yeah. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for checking us out. Don't forget to like, comment, share. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit subscribe and hit that notification bell so you guys know when I go live and drop new content, which starting October, I will be dropping a new episode on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So you're going to get another episode as well. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much for coming on and checking us out. I'll talk to you guys later. Remember, a legend begins with a sighting. Have a good night, guys. Talk to you later.
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?